Yeah, I'm Kelly White. I'm the CEO and founder of Risk Recon, which has been part of MasterCard since 2020. And the best part about being part of MasterCard, well, probably not the best, but pretty close, is MasterCard's now sponsoring the McLaren F1 team, right, Kristen? So I don't know if there's any F1 fans, but
There's a camera against the
okay. The swag will get better at the MasterCard booth. It's very good. Please do stop by. We have free coffee and other things after that. That's not what this talk is about, though. As a cybersecurity ratings company, the Risk Recon platform is used by companies across the world to monitor the cybersecurity hygiene of their suppliers. And one of the dimensions of that data that we provide as part of that service is alerting around breach events. And what our research team has done over the past, for several years now, is analyze the breach events to figure out, hey, what can we learn from this? And so we're up to 15,000 breach events now, and they tell a really interesting story. So that's what this is going to be about. We're just going to look at data of what we learned from 15,000 breach events. And please feel free to ask any questions you want, dialogue, whatever. If there's questions in the data that aren't being answered, but you think they'd be a good question, toss it out there, and we can have some discussion around it. That's the intent of this, though, is what do we learn from 15,000 breach events? Now, this, as I look at the data, and this kind of summarizes it, so if you need to leave right after this, this is actually the most dangerous condition for any company that we learn from this. So large internet footprint, you're a healthcare organization, you've been breached within the last 24 months, so you had a breach within 24 months prior. You have very poor cybersecurity hygiene on your internet-facing systems. And oddly, it's either Veterans Day or Christmas time period. And it is a Sunday. So heaven forbid Christmas or Veterans Day hits on Sunday and you're a large healthcare organization, you're probably toast. Anyway, that's what the data says. So let's cut into it a bit. Okay, so this is a study of 15,000 companies. And you can see, from the data, and my eyes aren't great, finance, highly represented, software, professional services. There's global coverage of it. I've got to go down to the big screen. Sorry. And then this shows the population by size. So global, broad industry coverage. Now, when you look at a top level, it's actually not 15,000. Round numbers are suspicious. It's actually 14,413 breach events. Among those, there were 1,454 destructive ransomware events, which we'll talk about in their own dimension as well. Very interesting characteristics of the subset of those destructive ransomware events that are worth talking about. So since 2012, the span of the study, 6.2% of companies have publicly reported one or more breach events. And 1.3, since we started seeing destructive ransomware events in 2016, 1.3% of the 150,000 companies has reported a destructive ransomware event. Now, globally, the metric that we come up with is, over time, 1.1% of companies are publicly reporting a breach. So if you have a third-party portfolio of suppliers or vendors, say 1,000, you could expect 10 of those in a given year to publicly report a breach, okay? So, and we'll talk about validation from another data source on this. But you can see, back in 2012, it was just 0.23. Now we're up to 1.15%. When you look at destructive ransomware events, 0.34% of companies are publicly reporting a destructive ransomware event in a given year. So you got 1.1 and 0.34. Does that surprise anybody? Does it seem low? It seems low. You know what? I thought it seemed low too. Okay? And I'm like, 1.1. Now these are not just any breach. This isn't just like, oh, we mailed some account statements to the wrong person or something like that. These are material breach events. So just keep that part in mind. But I still have the same question. Seems a little bit low. Does anybody know who Richard Searson is, how to quantify, measure anything in cybersecurity risk? He's a quant, good friend of mine. So he wrote that book, does a lot of quant work for cyber insurance companies and so forth. He had a LinkedIn post the other day. And in the LinkedIn post, he said, and what he was posting about was a CISO who was trying to measure risk for the organization, to estimate risk. And what's the probability of a breach event for the company within a given year? And he said this, his forecast was not bad. The CISO had actually forecasted to be 2.5% probability. He said, well, actually the rate hovers just below 1%. So I got to talk to Richard more about that number, but he's pretty darn accurate when he talks about this thing because he's hooked into the breach event data from cybersecurity companies. So I recommend following him. He's very entertaining, very smart. Okay, so let's talk about who is getting breached. So healthcare, when you look at all the breach events, 17.8% of those were of a healthcare organization. Common Spirit, Catholic Health, all of these companies, lots of breach events. Then it's followed by finance and government and so forth. Now, when you look at ransomware, same thing holds true. Healthcare, finance, healthcare, education, manufacturing are the ones who are really getting it on the destructive ransomware events. Now, when I say destructive ransomware events, that is where the systems are encrypted, where we're not, it seems like every breach event is now a ransomware event because, they're saying, hey, pay us money and we'll delete the data or whatever. That's not what we're talking about. Destructive ransomware event is the subset where, data may or may not have been stolen, but this is systems encrypted and they can't operate, okay? So healthcare is getting beat up on breach events, finance, government, manufacturing, food, energy, construction, not too bad. On destructive ransomware events, manufacturing, education, and healthcare. Now, when you look at the density, so that's just where the event's happening. What's the rate or density of events within a given industry? In this time period, 2012 to 23, 25% of the governments have reported one or more breach events. Healthcare, 24%. Education, 20%. And then you get down in, there's actually, while there's a lot of manufacturing breach events as part of the population, just 6% of manufacturing companies have publicly reported a breach event. Any questions or comments, any surprises here for folks? Okay. Finance. Did I put him? 7% right there. Yeah. I was a little surprised to see, this professional services makes up accounting firms, law firms, things like that. The deputy CISO of MasterCard is here, so I'm a little bit nervous now. I just spotted her, so if I start to stutter or something like that, then sorry. I got a professional crush. Okay, so the other thing we learn is that the larger the internet footprint, the higher the frequency of breach events. If you have a company over 5,000 internet-facing systems, they had an average of 1.28, and you get down into the smaller orgs, very lower rates of breach event. Okay, so this one's interesting, and let's just spend a minute on here and just think about this critically. What are we seeing here in this data? Any surprises here to you? Like what's surprising to you in this data? So this is showing the percent. So we look at across the geographies, and we look at the number of companies that we're monitoring in each geography, and these are the percent of companies that have been breached during the period of the study. Does anything stand out to you as odd? Do we have giveaways, Chelsea? Did we bring them? Okay. What do we have? Okay. Well, okay. Any ideas? So let's start here. South America. 2.4% of companies in South America have publicly reported a breach event. Does that seem strange? That seems weird to me. Now, North America seems to me to be the most this is, look at where we are, right? This is the Black Hat Security Conference. Cybersecurity, North America is the home for cybersecurity. I don't know, some of my friends in Europe might disagree, but North America, where did my North America go? 6%. So on one level, you could say, hey, those companies down in South America are doing much better than the ones in North America. I should be doing business. Like if I'm selecting a supplier, or I want to do sensitive data processing, I want to lower my breach event rate by 3x, I'm just going to host in South America. Is that the right conclusion? Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so either. So when you put a lens on this of the highly regulated countries, and Europe and North America being the most highly regulated, at least furthest along on it and most serious about privacy and breach disclosure and so on. Southern Europe, 3.3%. Western Europe, Northern Europe, 4.7%. North America, 6%. What's happening here? I think that it's just a reality that some geographies, because of the regulations, they're disclosing the breach events in the first place, whereas other geographies just are not doing it. So, perhaps, and I'm sure there's other dynamics at play, but perhaps, if you want to know about your breach events, if you want to know and you want to be sure that your supplier or somebody has been breached and they're going to tell you about it, maybe you do want to host in one of the higher regulated countries. Is that a reasonable conclusion? Yeah. I'm sorry?
Go up significantly with the SEC disclosure rule.
So your question's a good one. Will the breach events rate go up because of the SEC disclosure rule? It could. I think that rule is more. My guess is those companies are already reporting them, but they're just not doing it within the time window that's required by the new rule, which is that a 72-hour? 72 hours? Yeah, Alyssa told me it's 72-hour rule. But the point being is these regulations, I think they do have a force, and I think they should be part of your risk management program as you look at your extended supply chain. I think that factors in. Okay. The next thing we learn is companies previously breached are 3 times more likely to be breached again. So within the same study period, which, so across the 12 years, 5% were just breached once. Okay. But then you have the remaining 1.2% were breached multiple times. That's 20%. So if you just if you're looking at your portfolio, this could be a useful metric for you. Which companies have been breached? I should probably start paying attention to because 1 in 5 of those is going to have another breach. Well, this is kind of a long study. This is 12 years, so that's not really useful. CISOs don't even stay around that long. So what do I do with that? Well, let's look at the time frame. So what was the mean time between the next breach? So the average number of months until the next breach event was 25 months. So companies that had 2 or more breach events during the period, it was an average of 25 months between those breach events. And the median was actually 13.5. So it's a pretty tight window. And you can see now this one's interesting.
Lips. What are you talking?
27% of those will have another breach event within 6 months.
Pinging?
So again, some useful metrics here, some useful lessons. You look at your third-party portfolio, vendor gets breached, you better start really paying attention to them. Really put the screws on them. There's something happening there that's resulting in another breach. When I was CISO of Zions Bank Corporation, they were about a top 25 bank in the US at the time, about 100 billion in assets. We had this saying, and this was going back to like 2007. Oh yeah, our most secure vendor is the one that was breached within the last 12 months because they got a whole bunch of money to shore up their program. There's some more data I'll show you. This data plus some other things I'll show you, it's just not true. Cybersecurity is harder than just getting some money in a reactive way because of a breach event. And this is where we'll get into that a little bit. So the next question we looked at as we're studying the data is, well, what's the cybersecurity posture, the cybersecurity hygiene conditions of these companies that are getting breached relative to those that have not been breached? Okay, so what, to the larger population. And again, Risk Recon has visibility into this at this scale because we're providing OSINT-based cybersecurity ratings and insights into their cybersecurity hygiene that we can do passively from the outside in at scale. So we can look at things like software patching, web encryption, email security, network filtering, things like that. So 13 times higher breach event frequency for companies that have on our scale a D or an F rating. So A through F, the worst performing companies, 13 times higher breach event frequency compared to the general population. Now let's look at, to the left of those graphs, we can look at the chart. So the breach victims on average have 35 software patching issues at the time of the breach event. So we look at our data, breach is disclosed, we look at the date, we pull back our history on that company, and we can see that they have 35 issues, software patching issues. And we're not talking about all issues, we're just talking about CVE or CVSS scores of 7 or higher. Okay, so they're high and critical. That's 8 times the general population has an average of 4.1. That's nearly 9 times higher than the general population. I'll get up here if I can read it. I'm going to have to go back down because I just can't do it. I care about the people in the room most. The same things hold true for other areas. So unsafe network services, 8.8 times higher. Web encryption issues. And again, this isn't just all web encryptions. This is just, we're able to determine which systems actually need web encryption. We can tell which ones are processing transactions, collecting sensitive data, and so forth. So those ones that really need web encryption, 7 times higher. The system reputation category, which is 27 times higher, that's, those are organizations that are emanating, command and control signals out of their systems and so forth. So again, cybersecurity hygiene really matters, strong correlation in those breach events. Looking at it just at the destructive ransomware, the correlation's even more powerful between cybersecurity hygiene and the frequency of destructive ransomware events. In fact, we find it to be 37 or 35 times higher. And you can see the numbers here. But look at that distribution. The ones with the worst cybersecurity hygiene, much higher rates of destructive ransomware events. 2.1% versus, very good hygiene, 0.06, 0.3. So again, as you're looking at, as you're thinking about your own organization, as you're thinking about your supply chain, your vendors, these basics matter. We're talking about geographies, we're talking about the hygiene of those suppliers. It really matters for good risk outcomes. We do a lot of work with third-party risk management teams. That's the primary use case for our software. And since we've been in this since 2015, I've seen a pretty long evolution of third-party risk management in the industry. When I was CISO of a bank, third-party risk management, oh geez, we got to do this exercise, send out the questionnaire. But I think we're getting to a point, you look at what's happening today, you look at what the data shows us about hygiene, it's really time for business owners and others to stop making excuses and accepting excuses for poor hygiene in cybersecurity and really get serious about it, because the data's there that clearly demonstrates if you want good risk outcomes, you have got to do business with companies who have, consistently clean cybersecurity hygiene. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And back to what we were talking about before, do companies get better after they've been breached? Do they improve their hygiene? So what we did here is we looked at companies 1 year after their breach event to see if they improved. And the green, software patching 8% better. Unsafe network services on average, 56% worse. Going from an average of 20 to 32. So again, as you look at the data, there are companies that consistently are getting breached. Breach events don't result in improved behavior. So something worth paying attention to. Any questions so far or comments? We've had a few that I really appreciate. Chelsea does have a microphone if you want to raise your hand to ask a question or comment. Yeah.
Of these categories, what's the hardest one for?
I'll let you get the microphone here. We'll do it Phil Donahue style.
Great show, by the way. Of these categories, which is the hardest one for companies to do well in, to really stay on top of? Are they all weighted equally in terms of difficulty to increase your security posture?
Oh, well, yeah, I don't have an answer right off the top of my head. I mean, I'm kind of thinking about, what's most important, right? Your critical and high severity software patching issues, unsafe network services, these are a big deal. Web applications, web application security is always hard. Web encryption is it's not hard. It's just staying on top of all the certificates and making sure they're properly configured, they're deployed where they need to be. So I don't know. We do see the strongest correlation. So let me answer it this way, though. The strongest correlation to breach events is going to be right at the software patching, the unsafe network systems, and the system reputation. Okay, got it. Yeah. I mean, you could almost eliminate the other categories and just really focus on those three. But the point being is, I think that what you're looking for in yourself and in your partners is just good hygiene across the board, in the small areas and in the big areas. And why is that? Because it's a reflection of an organization that has strong operational maturity and capability to do that consistently. And I think that that's why we see companies, going back to that slide where we said, the company that was just breached has a 3 times higher likelihood of being breached, and it happens within the next 12 to 24 months. It's because cybersecurity is hard, and you don't fix it by throwing money at it. That's certainly part of it, but it takes top-down leadership, commitment, the right talent, the right people. It's IT done well. I mean, this is a real team sport, and it's not something that's easily done. So if you're looking at poor hygiene in one area, particularly, this is just looking at it from the outside in. Imagine if they're not getting network filtering or software patching done right on the internet, which is just a subset of their attack surface. Imagine what's happening on the inside if they're not getting that right. Does that make sense? Yeah. Another comment over here.
Would you say that the likelihood of a company getting breached again increases because it becomes public that they were breached, and so obviously their IT or their security wasn't up to snuff, so it kind of publicizes it for those other actors? Does that have an impact
It could be.
on it?
It could be. I think, was it the government of Costa Rica that got hit multiple times in a row by different gangs? And so, yeah, I mean, you could be getting a target painted on you, so that the act of disclosing just draws more actors towards you. It's worth thinking about.
And testing. I was thinking about that 1% that you mentioned in the
Yep.
beginning. This is from companies that are disclosing, right?
Yes.
But could be a lot that are not even disclosing because of that thing. They don't want to have a target on their back.
It could be. Yeah.
So
What are their motives? I don't know. We looked at that when we looked at the regulated countries, by law, you have to disclose.
okay.
I
don't think I saw there was Western Africa. Is
Yeah.
that not even there? Because I didn't see it in the slide, but I wasn't sure if my eyes were failing me.
it was, but actually I think that one actually had a higher level, the
that
highest
was
percentage.
Eastern. That was
Yeah.
Eastern.
Okay. Yeah. We may not have had any companies in Western Africa in the study. I don't know. Okay. The next area we'll talk about is how are these companies getting breached? Okay, so just talking about ransomware. With ransomware, it's interesting. Like when there's a general data breach event, it used to not be that they'd tell you the name of the gang that did it, but ransomware, for some reason, the gangs want to be branded, or they have to be because you got the payment exchange and so on, so that gets disclosed. But there's been a massive ramp in the number of active gangs. This isn't a running total. This is just the active gangs that have done exploit across the population of 150,000 companies that we've been tracking. And we hit 42 different gangs in 2023. Over the years, Lockbit and Ryuk and R-Evil have been some of the more active ones. So that's certainly driving it. There's just more gangs coming after it. Interesting year, 2023. So where are they going after? Are they going after your entity? Are they going after, I'm sorry, so is it an external actor compromising your own organization? Are they compromising your supplier and therefore you get breached? Or this is the supplier line, or is it an insider, an internal threat actor, one of your employees? And this is how it shakes out over time as we attribute it to the different actors. Does this surprise anybody? Any thoughts on why we've seen a precipitous decline in the internal threat actor, but a recent spike in the percent of breaches through suppliers? Say again? More APIs. Yep. Everything's as a service now, right? Let's let you get the microphone here. Sorry.
Typically, like a third-party code, like 2 times, 3 times, then your first-party code.
Yeah.
It's like use a lot of third-party stuff.
Yeah.
So you have more attack surface.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're also seeing the 2024 report will be really interesting because we've seen so many, big providers where there's a lot of concentration risk, like in the healthcare payment space and so on. You see 2,000 or so companies suffering because of that. So, companies that I didn't even know exist that process all the healthcare payments getting targeted. And then you see this concentration risk that we've been talking about for a long time actually becoming manifest. So I think it was a Change Now organization, or Change Healthcare, compromise at the center of all the payments and so on. I had doctors at church saying, "Hey, Kelly, what's up? I can't get paid." I don't know. I'll look into it. But yeah, I think the point about just the mass, as a service, APIs, other platforms, we're finally seeing this really come to pass. And I suspect that we'll continue to see a greater percentage of breach events coming from your digital supply chain. Hacking and malware still rule. So if you look at this from upper left graph, this is, all, without breaking it down in total, hacking 45%, malware 22%, error 18%, misuse 7%, and so forth. To the right of that, the external actor going directly against your organization. Favorite is, it's that general category of hacking, compromising system vulnerabilities or configuration issues. Below that, malware 29%. Lower left on the partner side, hacking and malware very similar. When you look at internal, it's just 64% of those are errors. I think that combined with the trend line of the internal actor breach events going down, all the investments that we put in the early 2000s and the 2010s in dealing with internal actors, data loss detection and locking down USBs, et cetera, encrypting drives, that's paid off. It's in a pretty good spot. Going back to the trend line, external actors, 58% of the breach events in 2012, external actor, all the way out to 2023, 57%. So it's, relatively speaking, it's flatlined. That third-party one is really stunning, and I think it actually speaks to, if you haven't been into your program and working on it for a long time, you got to ramp up fast, because I think this is where just quick surveying the crowd, is this kind of, are you seeing the same thing? Does this make sense that the supply chain is really becoming a big headache for you? But hey, we can say good job on the internal actors. So, okay. Now this kind of gets into, yeah, go ahead. Can we get a microphone over here?
Thank you. Just a quick comment on the last slide.
Okay.
You had social at the top. That's really surprising to me that the percentage is so low. What's qualifying as social? Because typically speaking, your biggest risk is your user base, uneducated user base, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's because of the data that comes in through the reporting. We don't get to the initial, the original vector. So it might be, hey, we stole some credentials and used those to gain access to these. But we don't know if it was through password stealing malware or credential guessing, so I think we have a problem with fidelity on the data at this level that we're looking at.
Do you know what that comprises, or what that comprises then, that 2 to 3% in social, what that actually...
I think it is where they were reporting that like it was a phishing attack, for example. But it's rarely reported to that fidelity in the breach disclosure reports.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
So it's fair.
Yeah.
It's fair. This one is just...
It just feels way off.
Yeah, I agree.
Considering risk,
I agree.
kind of risk analysis.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't model too far on this one, right? Okay. Thanks for calling it out.
Not to continue that, but I'm just curious, is that social platforms like Facebook, Twitter?
No. It's like
or
social
is it
engineering.
Engineering, okay.
Yeah. But again, importantly, and thank you, we don't have great fidelity in the public reports. So sometimes it's hard to categorize.
Much higher than
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to show you is true. This is what the data says. So first of all, what day of week? Sunday's a mess. I mean, this is where, now this is only for the date the ransomware was detonated. Okay, and this is where we can get, it's in this category of events where we can get really find like accurate. They say the morning or the evening. I mean, the reporters and the reporting around it get really into this because, our systems went down at this time, right? And so this isn't when the original compromise occurs. This is when the ransomware is detonated. Now, it used to be, as we've done this over the past few years, that there was a much stronger bias towards Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But as we got into 2023, things shifted. It's more of a 7 days a week job. And when I looked at it before, I thought, maybe they're looking at, companies moving to 4-day weeks or people leaving early on Fridays and they're not all staffed up on the weekends. But it is still true. I mean, Sundays are going to be a mess. So if you want the data, the point being is for you and also your suppliers, you should probably just make sure they're running 24/7 security operations and that they have an incident response capability across the program that can deal with these, because it's still true that they're going to hit 20% of them on Sundays. So we looked at holidays, and what we did here, because holidays shift over time on the day, and so like Thanksgiving moves around, it's like the second Thursday of every third year, whatever it is. But we looked at the holiday window dates, and there's always this question like, well, are breach events higher during the holidays? So we went to answer it, and you look at the week before and the week after the holidays. So 3 days before, 3 days after, I think is what we did for that window. And Veterans Day is just the worst. So 250%. I haven't dug into it close enough to see if there was a really big 1 or 2 attacks that happened in that time frame that were just mass scale. But Veterans Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween, Labor Day, 112% of normal on a relative to a normal time period. Okay? So Veterans Day, Christmas consistently, there's no noise, and there doesn't really seem to be noise on that day. I mean, consistently you can expect Christmas and Thanksgiving to be a mess. One of the incidents that kind of grabbed my attention around Halloween a few years ago during COVID was one of the big candy makers got ransomware attack and they had to shut down their candy manufacturing. It was a terrible year for trick-or-treaters. But that was one that happened around Halloween. Now, if you want to relax a little bit, 4th of July is good, Memorial Day, President's Day. But hey, we got Labor Day coming in September. Make people work. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, Veterans Day, you look at Memorial Day and Labor Day, those are definitely days that everybody takes off. Christmas, a lot of those, you get the idea. But Veterans Day, and it's not even a holiday that everyone really recognizes.
Yeah.
Any indication why? Is it because we're American? I mean, I know it's more than just...
This is where I'm wondering if one of the big mass-scale breach events really shifted the numbers up. Going back to 2016, 2017. That's the only thing I can think of. So, yeah. All right, this is, I think, the last one. How long is it taking to report a breach event? So, from time of compromise to public disclosure. Any guesses, average, how long it's taking? You think 6 months? You think 6 months? Anybody else? 4 months? Okay, you see Chelsea afterwards. She's got something for you. So it's actually 4.7 months, right? So you're pretty close at 6, but 0.3 closer there. What's interesting to me is if you drew a trend line through this, it's actually getting worse, not better. So as we track this by year, 65% will report within the first month. What's stunning to me is that we still see it, is that there's some breach events that went on for a year, 2 years, or more before they even discovered it. So there is that tail there. And then this is the breakdown of the days to publicly report a breach event, concentrated on this year, or last year, 2023. Here, months, average time to report the breach event. Collusion's the toughest to discover, 14.6 months. There weren't many collusion events, but those appear to be the hardest to detect and then subsequently report. External, internal partner. So those insiders, they're still a bitch. It's tough. You can't let them go. So, summarizing. If you got a large internet footprint, you're a healthcare organization who was breached within the last 24 months, and you have poor cybersecurity hygiene, and it's Veterans Day or Christmas, and it's a Sunday, God help you. You just might as well start making sacrifices to the gods. Risk Recon pitch, the only one. This is where we help. And this is where there's very strong correlation to cybersecurity hygiene and the risk outcomes that you want, right? And we make it really easy to get that fidelity. Thank you for the engagement. Thank you for the time. I hope this was helpful. We do have written research reports, I think, printed. If you want to get one here or at our booth on the more details on the destructive ransomware events. And yeah, thank you for the time.